If you've listened to any of these videos, you probably know that I don't do a whole lot of planning on these, and today is no exception. I don't know how many stories we're going to get in this video. I'm a little bit prone to let the loose ends drag on just about everything I do. I'm not very organized. I'm not a good planner. I just try to cram as much in a day as I can. Got a couple hours. We're going to do a video here, and I cannot wait to start picking through these stories and getting some good ones out of here for you guys to listen to. So settle back, get comfortable, and get ready for some really good stories. All right, here we go. Okay, let me try to set this next thing up for you before I get started. This is not a story that someone sent here to be narrated on the channel. What I'm about to read you is an email from a gentleman who heard a viewer submitted story on this channel, and it matched up with some evidence that he was given a while back from people who live in that area. Since he did not send this to necessarily be read, I'm not going to give you his name, and I've redacted all of the locations, and I've edited this email heavily just to tell you the story. Now, there's a photo involved with this, and at the end of the email, he offers to send me the photo, and I don't do photos. I have one video with a photo that a guy sent me when I first started this channel, and that video actually made it onto Coast to Coast website. It was it's pretty amazing. So these rare and what would you call them, credible photos, they get a lot of views and they get a lot of attention. But I'm going to tell you right now, I love looking at them, but I'm not interested in going down that evidence rabbit hole with this channel. All we do is tell stories, and I'm going to stick with what I know. So when I read the email, the man who sent it is going to know who he is, and I want to tell him right now, I know you didn't send this for me to read, but it's got a great story in it. It's just so good, and I'm not going to give your name out or anything like that. And I appreciate the email, and I'm gonna respond to you next week, and I'm gonna put you in touch with the person who sent the story that piqued your interest. So, okay, now all that said, I think you're gonna find this very interesting. He writes, "Sir, I've been listening to your stories this Sunday afternoon, enjoying each of them, and your gift of storytelling abilities." I'm just reading them. He said, "There was one story in particular that piqued my senses." And then he goes on to refer to the story and blah, blah, blah. "I became aware a few years ago of an incident experienced by a young female hunter who had placed a game camera on her family's property. She had retrieved the card from her camera a few days after installing it, and she was shocked at the image she caught on the camera. She and her parents were totally miffed at what was caught on the video. It's a video, not a still. The young lady was so frightened to see it that she vowed to never return to the area. The family kept this secret within the family, and I was made aware of it by my son, whose wife is a member of the family. My son sent a copy of the photographed creature, and though at the time I hadn't much concern or real belief in the existence of Sasquatch, I was amazed at what had been caught on the camera. I worked for some 20 or more years as a police detective, and therefore I always tried to maintain an open mind dealing with physical evidence, not some wild, crazy story. This photo image was, I thought, evidence. I was told that when the young lady's father and accomplices went to the area, they found some strange or weird things like tree limbs tied in circles, which at the time meant nothing to me, but now I understand they were probably structures that I've read about in Bigfoot stories. The family tried to keep this all quiet for fear that too many reckless rifles might swarm their property, and having cattle on their place, they worried about that. I mentioned this story to one friend and showed the photo of the creature, and he denied it, saying that it was only a poacher in a ghillie suit. Baloney. This is no ghillie suit, and the poacher is unarmed, and he walks like the Patterson-Gimlin creature. The family, I was told, did contact some Bigfoot authority who said that they would come investigate, but apparently they never did. Since my interest in these creatures has grown over the last few months, I asked my son to see if he could learn more details as to the structures or any tracks or other photo evidence. He has not responded after a few weeks. I'm afraid the family is still not talking about it. I failed to mention that the Bigfoot expert had told the family that he believed the creature to be a juvenile because an adult Sasquatch would have sensed the camera and either avoided it or destroyed it. I can forward the photo if you are interested by text or email. The strangest thing about all of this to me is that I usually hear of sightings or encounters being in heavily forested areas like Colorado or the Northwest, whereas our area is pretty well open with just enough cover for white-tailed deer. I don't know, but I don't believe this trail camera caught a guy in a ghillie suit. Thanks for any input you have. I got this email during a time when I was crazy busy, and Bigfoot stories were dropping in my inbox 8 to 10 a day, and I just didn't have time to go through them. And so this email, I think I got this back in June. That's where I'm at in the line of stories. I'm in May, June, and July, and I came across this and I thought it was fascinating. Again, it wasn't sent to be narrated on the channel, and I don't think the gentleman will care that I read his email, but that's fascinating stuff. I'd love to tell you where it is. I'd love to tell you more details about it, but I just don't feel like I could do that and with a good conscience. But it's interesting stuff. I really enjoyed reading that email. All right, let's go to another one. This is not a Bigfoot story, but it's pretty good. It's very short. You know, we're not locked into Bigfoot or Dogman. We've done UFO stuff. I actually like the UFO stories. They're interesting. But this is, we did a Banshee the last video. That was cool. And this is a little different, and I think it's interesting. I don't know what to make of it, but the story's good. The woman who wrote the email to me, her name is Trish. She says, "Hello, Mr. Cam. My name is Trish. I grew up in the Caribbean in a deep rural area, so much so we were called country bumpkins. I know my story does not fit the premise of your show, but I still decided to share it with you anyway. I'm glad you did, Trish. I've lived in Connecticut for about 7 years now. I just finished nursing school in May of this year, and I'm excited to embark on my new career. My mother is 74, and she is not in the best health, and myself and my sister share care for her. I had her this weekend, and I decided to ask her about something that happened when I was about 12 years old. I was very sick with pneumonia, and she was staying up with me late one night. I remember hearing a horse's hooves pounding the asphalt from about a mile away. It was galloping so fast that the footfalls resounded everywhere in the house, and everything inside shook as it came closer. Every animal in our tiny community were just going crazy. The horse went by our house, and then everything just got eerily quiet. We didn't know where it went from there, and that was weird because our house was the last on that dead-end street. My mom confirmed exactly what happened, and she added when she went home 2 years ago, her and some of the older people were talking about that night. A lot of creepy stuff used to happen when I was growing up. I didn't know about Bigfoot. What we called Bigfoot was a caterpillar that we were told that if you stepped on it, your feet would grow to an enormous size. And she writes, LOL, I hope my story made sense to you, and I wish you and your family all the best. Respectfully, Trish. Trish, I'm not sure what to make of that, but, we just have weird things go on in this world. Several people have written in and said, there are just things in this world we don't know about and we don't understand, and I agree with that. Could she have had a fever so bad she was hallucinating? Maybe, but her mother confirms it. It's the sound of a horse galloping by that's shaking your house. But anyway, it's a really great story, and I'm just rattling on, Trish. I'm sorry. I just really appreciate it. Thanks for the story. This story is a bow hunting story. The author's name is Mario, and it's a good story. He writes, I started bow hunting deer on a private piece of land that had a creek that ran down the middle of it. The owner was nice enough to give me permission to hunt there. My second year, I shot 2 deer, a buck and a doe one morning, and both ran east across the creek and up the opposite bank and just out of sight. I figured I would wait about an hour to retrieve them both. I could see I got a good shot on both of them, and I had tags for one of each. After an hour or so, I got out of my blind and went to retrieve my deer. I found the spot where one collapsed, and there was a big blood spot there, but no deer. I then began to sweep the area and found a second very bloody spot, and again no deer. Both of them were just gone, no blood trails or anything on the ground. The following year, I placed a deer stand in the area where those 2 deer had run to. There was a thick swampy area just beyond where I set up. I picked a tree that had 5 big trunks growing out of the same base root. It looked like the perfect spot because it hid my presence and was about 12 feet from the ground. This was in August, about a month and a half before the season started. In October, when the bow season started, I showed up first thing in the morning, about 45 minutes before daylight, and climbed up the tree, and I got into my chair stand. After it was light enough to see, I was super quiet, and then the tree I was in started shaking violently. It felt like I was in a massive earthquake, but the only thing moving was the tree. Suddenly, I heard a huge tree break up in the canopy above me. Then the tree stopped shaking. I was really shaken up bad because I was completely baffled and shocked at what had just happened, and I thought I was going to fall out. I'm a former Marine, and I'm not scared of much, but this was something I could not explain. I then got back to my senses, and my fear instinct kicked in. My instincts told me not to look up and to leave right now. I lowered my bow, and I got out of there. Being a bow hunter, I went back to hunt off that tree again. Almost every time I could hear something walk up behind me in the early morning darkness and stop a few yards behind me and just stand there for a few minutes, and then it would leave right before daylight. This happened almost every time. Afterwards, I also saw a maple tree that was about 18 to 20 inches in diameter, broken off at about 8 feet above the ground, and it was dropped across the trail that took me to that tree stand. I also had a ground blind about 45 feet from my tree stand, and a smaller tree was broken and had fallen over the top of my ground blind. There was also odd animal behavior. I walked through 30 to 40 squirrels one evening. They never tried to run, and I was weaving through them. It was like they knew I was safe to be around and not a threat. I moved shortly afterwards. Mario, that's a cool story. You know, people hear noises and have strange things happen in the woods. I don't know that it necessarily means it's a Bigfoot, but that's pretty weird. I'm not sure how I can't picture in my mind this squirrel thing. You were walking through squirrels. Were they on the ground, just kind of watching you go by, or what? But apparently, it seems like this story kind of abruptly ended, but I thought it was good anyway. A lot of bow hunters early in the season, they see some creepy things in the woods. My son's a bow hunter, and he's never told me about anything really creepy, but he sent me some pictures that he'll take out of his stand, and there are some weird structures and things going on in these river bottoms where we live. So I hear you, bow hunter. Crazy things happening in the woods. Thanks, Mario. Okay, this is awesome. And I want to say right now, I love reading stories written by women. You women really, really take time and write well. You pay attention to punctuation, and it's just so easy to read stories written by women. That being said, this story is sent by Claudia. Claudia is 71 years old, and she lives in the Pacific Northwest. And she writes, I grew up in southern Illinois, where there had been some sightings, but I was unaware of it and did not hear about Bigfoot until moving to Oregon in 1970. There are so many reports in the Northwest that I began to be a believer, having lived in Portland, south of Portland, and in the mid-southern coast area for over 35 years. Any time I was actually in the woods, which admittedly was not really often, I was thinking about the possibility of an encounter, but only read of some newspaper sighting reports and heard a few TV sighting reports delivered even in the Northwest more jokingly than seriously. It was not until 2006, while employed as a planter grant writer for the Spokane Tribe of Indians in northwest Washington state, about 100 miles south of Canada, that I briefly saw what I believe was a juvenile Sasquatch. I was driving north toward home after... You know, that's a book by Willie Morris. Y'all ever read the book North Towards Home? If you haven't, it's an old book, and it's a... Boy, can I go off on a tangent. Claudia, I'm sorry. Where was I? I was driving north toward home after a work day on the Spokane Indian Reservation in Wellpennant, Washington, via State Highway 231. I had just left the reservation property and was just north and outside of the eastern border of the reservation. As I glanced east to the right side of the road down an embankment, I saw him, but only from above as he descended, mostly on all fours, toward an area with water not visible from the road. He had shoulders, real shoulders, no visible ears or tail, and had a scraggly, ashy, black hair, maybe 4 inches long. I don't think he was much over 3 feet long, but I saw no mother on either side of the road accompanying the youngster. The road is treed with pines on one side and open on the side where he was. During my years there, I heard tribal members say they were on the reservation, 159,000 acres with about 50 miles of paved roads. I saw on TV that people looked for them on the same road I had traveled, but a little further south. I heard TV reports reclaim sightings of Bigfoot in the Spokane area and a Ute Indian grandma and her grandson who were friends in the town where I lived, and they told me they had watched one while driving another highway that is east of town heading for the freeway north of Spokane. That full-grown Sasquatch was said to have carried a full trash bag over its shoulders as it crossed the road a ways in front of them. I have since moved to western Washington near Mount St. Helens. This is Bigfoot country, and I've heard of encounters in the area from stories on your channel and Sasquatch Chronicles. Who? I'm just kidding, I know who they are. And others. I'm now 71. I still don't actively look for Bigfoot except in fir trees around my house. I have a 47-year-old son who loves to fish and boat in the Northwest, but who remains neither a knower nor a believer. However, his 7-year-old daughter is a believer, and I hope that, if not he, she one day has a story to share with you. Thank you for your eagerness to receive and share and reliving of our encounters. Well, you're welcome for that, and thank you so much for sharing your encounter, Claudia. I think seeing these things from cars, that's how I want to see one. I want to be driving down some creepy highway or whatever and just drive past one. That would be plenty for me, and I would be tickled to death with that. And you've experienced that, and I just enjoyed reading it. I thought it was well put together, and I just appreciate you so much, Claudia. Thank you, ma'am. I love the story. It's sent by Joe. He lives in Louisiana. I did a video back, I don't know, on the Honey Island Swamp Monster. He's had an experience with him with that monster when he was a kid, That's what this story is about, and he's a good writer. I think you're going to love this. He writes, "My name is Joe, and in 1974, 4 sixth grade boys had a summer adventure in the bayou that would remain with me for the rest of my life. I have only shared this story once before, back in 1974. My friends and I were going into the Honey Island swamp to shoot some squirrels and have an adventure through that mysterious swamp. We started out having poor boy sandwiches and RC colas to gain strength for the trip. So the 4 of us struck out in 2 pirogues at about 11 a.m. on a hot July day. We had our .22 rifles. Mine was an ancient Remington, and we had a couple of bleach bottle jugs we filled with water and froze the night before. This way we could have cold water all day. It was a normal Louisiana hot day. You know the kind where wearing long pants chafes so bad you get diaper rash on your inner thighs. It took about 2 hours to get to the main part of the swamp from where we launched. We were in those little 12-foot long flat-bottom skiffs the Cajun calls pirogues. We spent the day paddling around the different bayous, creeks, and dead ends looking for trees that had squirrels for us to shoot at. We would paddle up to a piece of dry land and get out of the boats and look for animals to shoot, and then get back in the pirogues and look elsewhere. 4 little men on an adventure. What we would soon run into would change my life forever. We were at that point of the trip that it would be time to turn around and go back to the landing spot to be picked up. This is when things started to happen. One of those torrential New Orleans afternoon storms was brewing. We could see the black clouds on the horizon and knew we had to get on the move. Because of the storm, the swamp had suddenly become really dark and ominous, and now it didn't feel so welcoming there. This is when we came upon a pile of bones that we used to call the boneyard. It is where an animal had died and was consumed by all the critters that come upon it. It looked as if a couple of huge boars had brought it there. The scary thing was that it looked as if something giant had tried to twist these animals' heads off, and they were successful. Also, as we picked through those old bleached bones, maybe 6 weeks old, some of the bigger bones were snapped in half as if someone had done that to get to the marrow. This was a sign of a huge meat eater for sure. Suddenly, we started to hear this distinct whistle. One might say it was an owl, but we knew it was mimicry. We all knew the sounds of native people using animal sounds to communicate, and this whistle was clearly made by a man. So we thought we had wandered into a Cajun fella's land, so we did what any self-respecting 12-year-old boy would do. We ran. The pirogues were about 200 yards away, and we ran at full speed. The strange thing, though, is that we all knew that this thing was following us. We couldn't hear him, but we continued to hear the whistles and, of course, the sounds we made crashing through the jungle and the locomotive sound you hear in your ears when that adrenaline is spiking. Finally, we made it to the pirogues and started paddling for all we were worth. As we paddled for our lives, we were startled by a huge splash. It was as if this creature had done a cannonball into the coffee-colored dark brackish water. We all turned to see this giant beast swimming after us with intent. Sometimes at night I'll wake up dreaming of that malevolent sneer on the face of that devil. That look told me it knew that we had gotten away this time, but it was like it was saying, "Don't you ever come back. You will not be so lucky next time." We paddled a long time in silence, and we never said something stupid like, "Did you see that?" We all knew what we had seen. It was the Honey Island swamp monster, no doubt in my mind to this day. Deep inside, I think we all realized we could never tell anyone about this. I think I lasted a day and a half. On Sunday night, with my parents and their neighbors enjoying a few Evan Williams Black and Cokes, I blurted out the story of what had happened. That is when Mr. Jones, an older neighbor, said in his normal Kentucky drawl, "Joey, you boys need to stop chasing the fog machine. That skeeter killer done addled your brain, boy." I was crestfallen and buried that story until April 29th, 2019. That is when my friend Dixiecryptid told the Honey Island Swamp story. A wave of emotion rolled over me, and now those folks that laughed at me that night are all gone to their just rewards. As for me, I have released this event, cleansing my soul of what happened to me that day so long ago in the Honey Island Swamp. Oh, Joe, that is a great story, man. I know it scared you to death, and I know, I guess, did you say you had nightmares or it bothers you to this day? I'm always, I always regret that for people, but for other people to hear these stories is great. I mean, it's just great fun. And I don't know anything else other to say than to say thank you for actually taking the time out of your day to write this down for us all to enjoy. And I hope you're dealing well with it. Sounds like you probably are. And I wish you the best. Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate you. Okay, how many was that? 4 or 5? I can't even remember. I can barely speak. But I enjoy doing the video. I love these stories. Thank you all for listening. And we'll see you on the next video. Have an awesome weekend. Thanks.